This is LaunchPad. If this is your first time here, we do this once a month. We send out emails or throw it in the Mac admin Slack, or you'll see it on LinkedIn or somewhere like that. But once a month, we get together. We go through the latest Apple and Jamf updates in the last month, and then we have a keynote presenter who will talk about a relevant topic that we care about. We are joined by Wade Treadwell, who is the Senior Security Systems Engineer at Jamf. And we had a conversation with Wayne a while back because we were really trying to wrap our heads around how Jamf Security Cloud works because we had a couple clients that really needed help with that. And we were having a hard time kind of figuring out how this product works and where to find help for it. And we had a conversation with Wayne, and he was able to give us a lot of really good knowledge on how it worked and answer all the crazy questions that I had about this product. So after that call, I asked Wayne if he could come and speak at LaunchPad because of his depth of knowledge in this platform. So I'll give it over to you, Wayne, to talk about what you're going to talk about.
Thanks, Chris. Appreciate that. Yeah, so I'm Wayne Treadwell. So I'm obviously with Jamf, and as Chris mentioned, I'm a security engineer whose focus is working with partners like Rocketman and helping them understand some of our security tech. I have a particular focus on the mobile space, and that's what I want to talk with everyone here today about. So without further ado, let's talk about what Jamf mobile security looks like today. I'm sure many of you as Mac admins familiar with Jamf as a product suite may be familiar with Protect Connect and what that does on the Mac. But for some time now, we've had a mobile security offering that we acquired actually a few years back from a company called Wandera. And we've had some chances to evolve that product suite, build it into the Jamf product family. And the suite I'm about to show you is the where we stand today. It's the fruits of that labor and that acquisition. And we want to spend a few moments and talk to you about what that looks like today. So as the title of the session says, it's the new reality of work is remote now. It's all hybrid or remote work that folks are doing more and more often, even if they do report to a physical office. The devices are hypermobile, the connections are hypermobile. It wasn't too long ago that even if you did have a mobile device, an iPhone, maybe you were stuck to a 2G or a 3G connection, and by default, the type of work you were able to accomplish in a remote capacity was artificially limited by even the connection state that you had. That's really changed. Changed, of course, with 4G, LTE, and now, of course, with 5G networks and robust, hopefully. Most places there's robust Wi-Fi connectivity with, in some cases, fiber internet speeds. So we're really able to work in new capacities in a remote sense that we were not able to before. So that's really what this is. That's really what we're focused on here. And I'll go back one. The suite is called the Jamf Security Cloud. So our mobile security offering is the Jamf Security Cloud. And so what is that and what is it made up of? Well, there's three core components inside of the Jamf Security Cloud, and I'll go past them here one at a time. And then at the end, certainly feel free, I should say, ask questions. I have the gift of gab, so I'm really good at powering through these things. Feel free to ask questions. I know the Rocketman team is going to look for questions, so if you've got them in the moment, feel free to ask. And at the end, we will also have some dedicated time for Q&A. So I also want to show you the actual portal and jump in and take a look at what we've got there. So the first leg of the three-legged stool here is content filtering. What that looks like in Jamf Mobile Security is a system that is cloud proxied. All of the data from devices is being vectored through our security cloud. We're allowing administrators to come in very quickly and use category-based filtering to come in and say services like adult, gambling, illegal, these are not part of our acceptable use policy, and we want to block devices from being able to access them, regardless of their connection state. So that means they could be on cellular network, they could be at home, they could be back in the corporate network, certainly could be on a hotspot. and we can uniformly apply these same policies regardless of how the device is connecting. And administrators can do this very easily with just a few toggles. We do have granularity where folks can jump down into particular properties. You can whitelist, blacklist as well. And I'll show you more of that more in detail in a moment. But I want to call everyone's attention down to the lower left-hand corner where we're calling out the platforms. As you know, Jamf is synonymous with Apple devices, and that is true here as well. But we are also working with Android and Windows devices. So if folks from a security perspective need to have a one solution to rule them all from a security layer, this solution can solve for that. It can bolt in and solve for Android devices and Windows devices. I will say at Jamf, we will always really be Apple first, Apple best. We have several unique technologies that we're integrating into this product. Like in the example of content filtering, where applicable, we're doing on Apple devices, we're doing on-device content filtering. That means we can apply the same policies that we are doing in the cloud. We can allow the device to do that. The device can accomplish the content filtering locally, and that also adds an element of privacy because our cloud is not involved in the filtering process. We're letting that happen on device. So there's still a very strong Apple presence here with technologies, but I just want to call out that we are working cross-platform with these. One other element here to call out around content filtering is that we do also have the ability to do data capping. So if organizations are still working in limited data plans or there is a want to monitor consumption, we can solve for that by placing caps on domestic or roaming connectivity for devices. This is all part of this content filtering module. So with that, I'll move on to the second leg of the stool, and that is Mobile Threat Defense, or MTD. That's a category is defined by Gartner for threat defense, essentially. What we would typically think about in the Mac space on Protect, we have an EDR client. This is our equivalent for mobile devices. And again, I want to highlight that where, again, we are cross-platform, we are doing some unique elements here. That is on iOS, we're working within the platform. We're working, of course, with Apple. We have all the proper entitlements so that we can do things like scan the device, we can contain threats, and we can help the end user remediate threats, all from within the Jamf Trust application, which is the name of the client that will be installed alongside the solution on the device. But of course, again, we have our cloud component, and we know that the best medicine for a threat scenario is prevention. So we want to prevent the threat from coming down to the device to begin with. And so we're doing a whole lot of detection and prevention in the cloud from threats. Part of the advantage of the acquisition that we have here is some AI, some machine learning that's been out there for quite some time now, about 7-8 years, crawling the web, doing things like in the instance of content filtering, indexing web-related content, putting it into categories, and assessing the same type of traffic for threats. So this gives us a wide range of a database to pull from. That means when administrators put into effect categories, I'll show you them in a moment when we look in the portal, but administrators can select from a number of categories that are mainly on by default for things like malware. And so we say, okay, well, what's malware? Well, it's bankware, it's adware, it's ransomware. It's all of the various things that we're hearing about and encountering on a day-to-day basis. We're able to turn those filters on. We can cast a wide net in the cloud, hopefully prevent the vast, vast majority of that from ever reaching the device, but we still have the ability on device to do containment and remediation of threats if they should make it down to the device. So this is mobile threat defense. This is the second leg of the three-legged stool. And the final leg is, as Gartner and these other firms would categorize it, Zero Trust Network Access, or ZTNA solution set. These are all part of the Jamf Security Cloud. At Jamf, we're not really talking about it in terms of ZTNA, although you could put it in that category. We're terming it trusted access, and that's because we're doing some really cool stuff in on the Apple platform, some Apple specific tech as well to be able to do that. And I'll talk to you about that here in a moment. But trusted access, or ZTNA, for those who maybe only have a passing familiarity with it, think of it as a next-gen VPN replacement. And at Jamf, we're not using a traditional VPN stack. We're not using IPsec to accomplish the end-to-end encryption that's happening. We're using another technology called WireGuard to make that happen. We've chosen that for a few reasons. The first is that it's far more performant with less bandwidth and less overhead from a server and a device perspective. And it degrades much more seamlessly. So as the network bandwidth gets a bit more challenging, it's more likely that you're going to have a usable, sustainable connection, even in challenging environments. So that's important for us in terms of making sure that this connection, which we'd like to gate all of the sort of corporate sensitive materials behind what we're calling a trusted access connection, so that even if folks are in challenging network environments, they can still gain access to those resources. So a little bit about trusted access and what we're doing here and why this is a little bit different than ZTNA. ZTNA, typically you're talking about the connection state. You might be talking about the device that is under management. And you might be talking about the authentication of the end user using something like an identity provider. And we are doing all of those things, but we're taking all of those things quite a bit further. So in a trusted access connection, what we're doing is we're validating first and foremost, who is the user? Is the user part of the organization? And is the user granted access to either the connection through trusted access and to the end destination through conditional access policies? We're supporting identity providers like Okta, Azure, Entra, or Google for identity as well. So we can work across those services to validate identity. We're also looking to validate the device. So in the case of Windows and Android, that means we might be going back to a UEM system that those devices might be housed in to validate that they are in fact devices that are under management by those systems. And of course, we can do that on Apple devices with Jamf Pro, and we do, but we take it a step further. Apple has what they call a device attestation, an ability for Apple to attest to the authenticity of that device based on a signature or a fingerprint of that device that we then supply an Apple attestation server. The server comes back, gives us a yes, no answer to the validity of that device. We now know that not only is that device as we think it is, the device that's enrolled in Jamf Pro, we're getting validation from Apple that this is in fact the device that they manufactured. There's no spoofing attempt to happen here. There is no sort of man-in-the-middle attempt to thwart the identity of a device. So it's another step further in validating the authenticity of a device. And we can do that because Apple's providing a device attestation. We're, of course, taking full advantage of those services to give, of course, an Apple best experience using this Jamf technology.
I have two quick questions.
Yes, go ahead, please.
Is device attestation required for ZTNA?
Is not required, no.
Okay. And the app that is up here, is that the Jamf Trust app?
That's correct, yes.
Is that not being deprecated?
We are going to be transitioning this application over to self-service. So there's a self-service 2.0 application that will in time replace this.
Okay, thanks.
Yes, but great question. Okay, so so the last piece of this puzzle is to come back to the second leg of the stool, which is, okay, so if we have Mary on a Tuesday who can access HR resources, and Mary's on an approved device, and we've gone to Apple, we've done device attestation, and we now know that this device is approved, well, certainly we're good to connect, right? Well, no, we'd like to place another layer in, and that is we want to do real-time assessment of the device risk state before we validate a connection. So in other words, we want to know that the device that Mary is connecting in on a Tuesday has not been compromised. And to do that, we're looking back over the device's what we call risk score, and I'll show you this when we get into the portal. But thanks to our MTD layer, we're able to assess that, provide a score based on activity, and this is a collective activity over whatever span of time, in so much that the device has not been remediated against those threats. So in other words, it's additive. So if there's a couple of threats or potential threats that the device has encountered, we're looking at those and we're tallying up the score, so to speak, until such time that those threats have been mitigated and taken care of. So that gives us the ability to, one, give the administrator a risk tolerance based on the particular connection, and then two, protect those resources against potentially compromised devices. Even though we may have, a corporate-owned device, we've got an end-to-end encrypted connection. We've validated the user state. We also want to make sure that the device hasn't been compromised as well when we make that connection state. So these are some of the things that we're doing that make this really become what we're calling a trusted access story. And then finally, I just want to talk about the ecosystem for trusted access. So of course, we're working with ourselves. We're integrating this in with our other MDM products to make sure that we have great first-party integration. But we're also working with other providers as well to make sure that this ecosystem really can flourish. Obviously, we're using Microsoft. We have Intune support. So folks who are using Intune can use a trusted access connection. We're also using them, of course, for identity, as we are with Okta. But you'll notice things like Workspace ONE up here, and IBM for their MAS 360 instance. So that would primarily be in areas where Jamf doesn't manage, right? We don't manage Android devices, so we're going to have to work with partners who do that. If we're going to bring that into the fold, we're doing that here. So this is a larger group of folks. I want to also call out AWS. We have a native connection type for folks who have AWS connections where they can choose trusted access as a native connection type to make that setup and configuration even easier. And we've worked with Amazon to build that integration in. And then finally, the portal I'll show you here in a moment. We can export any of the data out. We know a lot of folks, if they're concerned with security, as many are, they may want to use things like tools like IBM or Splunk as part of their, or Sentinel as part of their SIM/SOAR system, and they may want to migrate this out and just use this as another point of telemetry, and we're certainly allowing that to happen too. So just wanted to take a moment to touch on the ecosystem of support that we have for trusted access and why we think this is a little bit further than what you typically would talk about with ZTNA. So I'm going to pause there. I'll also switch over to so we can do a quick demo. Okay, so I'm here in the Jamf Security Cloud. I'm at the dashboard. I'm sure you're all familiar with dashboards at this point. What I'll say about our dashboards, two things. One, these are sort of fixed widgets. That's because we know the metrics and the components that folks want to focus in on. You'll notice that they're tagged. Each one of the widgets has a tag: access, security, or data. Access is relevant for our ZTNA components, security, ZTNA. Anything data is around our content filtering capabilities. That's what these widgets correlate back to. I'll spend a moment here on the security component. I told you a moment ago about how we're collecting risk scores. Here's what it looks like on the dashboard. We're looking at the deployment, all of the devices that we have the solution installed on, and we can see at a quick glance how we're doing in terms of the deployment and the health. And we see that 50 devices are in a secured state. We have none in a low state. We have 6 in a medium state. If I want more information, of course, I can click right into the dashboard here, and that will give me more information on that particular data point. In fact, I'm going to do that now so we can get an idea of the type of analytics and data we can capture based on mobile threat defense. So what we're looking at is a device view. We're here under reports in our security tab, and we're looking at device view. That's where it brought us into. And what we have is stack rank based on the severity, the devices that are at risk. So we have 2 devices in a high risk state. We have Brandon and we have Danny. And so we're selected on Brandon here. And what we see are there are a number of configuration-based concerns we have for his device. And then below, we see the threats on this device that are sort of listed below. I can hit the disclosure here. I can get a little bit more information on this. And then as administrator, I can decide, maybe Brandon has not taken heed of warnings and has not taken any action to mitigate these threats. This now as administrator puts you in the power, one, to report on this information, and two, to take action. I'm going to switch over to threat view here, because what I want to show you is that, again, we have a stack ranked list, but this time we're less focused on the user and we're focused a little bit more on the threats. So here we have malware. So if I were to click on the malware, we have two pieces of malware that are threatening the fleet, as it were. If I click the disclosure, I'll get, again, some more information, and we see here this piece of malware is installed on Brandon's device. So we can get back to Brandon's device as well, looking at this from a threat view. If I click the app insight, now, before I jump into this, what I'll say is most users will probably set it and forget it. They'll set up the policies, they'll accept what threat defense is doing for them, the analytics that we're using to make decisions about a fingerprint of a potentially risky or malicious piece of software. But if you want to dive in more, if yesterday Google Services was a perfectly acceptable application for folks to be downloading, and then tomorrow we're blocking it, you may want to understand why that is. And if we click on App Insights, here is where we get into a little bit of the forensics and understanding why we made the decision that we made. So for instance, we get all the information. In this case, it happens to be an Android device that's been infected, but we get information about the device and the platform. But then we can see things like the MD5 and the SHA1 hash. These are the hashes the developer used to publish the application. And if these hashes differ by even a digit or a numeral, then we have some sort of tampering of the asset, meaning it's not what was published by the original publisher, in this case, Google. So that would indicate man in the middle, probably some piece of software that was at one point legitimate that's had something injected into it. So right off the bat, we know that there's a problem with this software. We can now understand why threat defense has tagged this. But if I come down, I get more information. I see that Brandon's device is the only device in the fleet that has this particular piece of malware on the device. And if I go down, I can see from a permission state what this particular service was doing while it was installed on the device. This gives you, the administrator, some evidence as to what might have been happening and the potential risk that might have been exposed while this service was installed on the device. So things like accessing location or accessing full network access to the system, or whether it be disk access, other permissions that would have been triggered as a result of the application being installed on the device. And if I go down further, I can see all of the URL activity from this service while it was installed. So this is a great way to be able to come back, understand the analytics of the potential attack that might have happened, what the exposure is, and also why we made the call that we did to place this in a risk category and quarantine these particular, in this case, a service on a device. So that all is all right from, we started here on the dashboard. We're able to drill in very quickly and get some analytics about what's happening in the fleet. We also do CVEs, so we can look at those. The difference between what we're doing with threat defense versus a CVE tends to be a little bit more clinical. It's researchers have had a chance to digest and understand what that threat surface looks like. And typically, it's usually also abutted by some sort of a software-based addressing of that issue as well. Versus what we're doing in threat defense, they may not have been sized up. We're looking at a fingerprint of an attack, and we're trying to be proactive before something has gotten to this point where something has been fully understood. But we are looking at both, and we're giving you a sense of, particular devices that based on their software state or their level of patch, or major and minor software updates, may have some exposure based on a publicly available CVE. So those are here as well. I want to jump over and show you in the few minutes that we have. I do want to open it up for Q&A. I want to show you what it looks like to configure these services. So I'm going to stick with security. I'm going to jump over to our policies under security. Here's where we can configure or make changes. By default, these are all on, but I want to show you that we have threat categories here around web-based threats, endpoint-based threats, network-based threats, and device-based threats. So in each of these categories, we're doing something a little bit different. So web-based, pretty self-explanatory. These are all things that, while interacting or using the web, may potentially be an issue. Things like phishing, data leaks. So if I click the disclosure here, as I've done, we can see what we're looking at for data leaks. Things like credit card information, password, email, location data. So maybe you're a small business and you're processing credit card payments over an application, but you never use the web browser. So maybe what we do is turn off the app-based analytic, and we would leave the web-based analytic on so that we can continue to contain and validate when some potential risk state, right? Credit card in this instance should not leave over the web. We want to be notified when that happens. And to do that, when we can select a category here, we can select a notification trigger. I'll say, regardless of what happens, this data is always going to show up in reporting. But there's times when something happens and you want to be immediately notified when it does. We can send off triggers to administrators and even to users. The idea here is to improve the posture and the awareness of end users around their activity and their behavior, hopefully with improving their posture as time goes on and making them aware. Now, if, let's say, I was actually talking with a company a couple weeks ago, and their whole thing was around spam. They were a marketing company. They basically, they send out what a lot of filters would call spam, and for them, they wanted to use this, but they also want to rate it much lower, right? They wanted to say, well, we don't want this to block downstream conditional access policies. We also don't want to see that risk score increasing as prevalently with these devices based on that. So we're able to come in here and custom edit this. And this is where you as the administrator would custom weight or rank the threats as you see them. And of course, if I'm unconcerned with one, I can just deactivate it and then it's not a concern. So this is what we're doing here with threats. I just want to briefly show you some of the other categories. So around malware, the ability to look for adware, bankware, generic malware, and of course things like ransomware, even SMS-based attacks, Trojans, things of that nature. Of course, we're able to scan and look for these things all of the time. And for a mobile device, of course, this is a really important element to add to that package, because we've had Protect on the Mac. We need something as well to be fully secure across mobile platforms as well. And that's what MTD is bringing to us here. Network-based threats. These are things where we're trying to find things that are happening typically over UDP, not not HTTP-based traffic. We're looking at UDP, traditionally non-routable traffic to look for potential threats, particularly right here around risky hotspots. You got these honeypots people connect to. They don't realize that, in fact, the whole thing is there may be some level of access there, but it really is there to gain some sort of access. And then finally, on device. So these would be elements of the device that would be placing the device in a risky state. Of course, things like jailbreaking. Did somebody download, what's called here a risky iOS profile or just some random profile from the internet? These are things we want to be able to obviously contain, get reporting on, and obviously prevent from devices from downloading. You'll notice here, for those of you keen-eyed, we have things like the ability to track for OS major and minor vulnerability. And what I'll say for those of you who have been using Jamf quite a while, you'll know that you can do similar things in Jamf. You can certainly make categories. You can set up a target version. You can take action on those devices in bulk. So what's the difference here? Here, we're less concerned about the versioning of the number. We're more concerned about looking for versions that have specific exploits and vulnerabilities in them that we want to remediate. So this is the same sort of thing, but from a remediation standpoint. Finally, I know we just got a couple of moments here. I want to just show what it looks like to set up internet policies here. So if I come over to the internet policy, I told you before about some of our content filtering. It really is this easy to come in and select a category and say, we want to block this. Adult is not part of our acceptable use policy. Maybe gambling, illegal websites. We don't want those. I come down to social. I block those as well. If I hit the disclosure, I can see that by property here, I can also block or allow based on property. So maybe we want to say LinkedIn is an approved site. The thing to note here is sometimes you get the question about like, well, but there are basic tools that do these sort of things. Again, it comes back to that indexing. Facebook has over 400 different URLs that it uses for users to access. It's really hard to make sure you're not playing whack-a-mole. It is that net that we're casting that makes this really easy for administrators to come in, flip a few switches. You can choose between desktop and OS application of the policy, and as well based on NIC. Are we talking cellular? Are we talking Wi-Fi? Are we talking roaming or domestic data? And we can apply these policies in those fashions as well. And all of our policies, whether they're threat-based policies or if they're internet-based policies for content filtering, you can create custom rules for the algorithm as well. So you can whitelist, blacklist either threats or websites to make sure that the content you need to either be blocked in the rare cases it's not blocking it, or in a case where you need to work with content that the algorithm might be blocking. Of course, you can open that up as well. So this is a very high-level overview of some of the tech that we have in here. I did speak about some of the compatibility with other UEM and MDM systems. And of course, we have Jamf product here, Microsoft Intune, IBM, Citrix, Workspace ONE, and Avanti platforms are supported as part of this UEM Connect, where we have some exchange of information going back and forth. And then from an identity provider standpoint, we again are working with Microsoft, Okta, and Google to achieve identity services. So I'll pause there and see what questions are here. Maybe I'll leave the screen up in case folks have particular questions about Security Cloud itself.
Does Security Cloud integrate with more than Jamf Protect? Does it integrate with like Splunk and Elastic and other SIEMs?
Yes, it does. Yep. We have a full list of them. Microsoft is supported, IBM is supported, Splunk is supported. There are a few other SIEMs that are supported, and we do have full documentation on that integration for those platforms.
How would you go about adding more than one user? Like say a user that's in your IDP that is on like 3 machines or 2 machines.
Okay, so you're asking around. So first off, let me back up and say the connection state is only required from an identity provider required for our ZTNA connection. You can use it in other capacities for MTD and have it connected in under content filtering, but the use case is limited. We also have just so we're aware, there are 2 ways to do single sign-on. This particular compatibility module is around primarily around the use of the ZTNA functionality. You could, within the software itself, for access into Security Cloud, connect in over an SSO connection as well. So that would be access into the console. This is access into the ZTNA components. And for your question, when we connect in over what the module is called UEM Connect here, the devices that those individuals are using, assuming that they're approved for the solution, will flow in. Here we're seeing a grouping that has come over from an MDM, and they've been grouped based on whatever groups they fall into. And then there are configuration profiles that are pushed out, or what we call activation profiles, for the services. As long as the user is connecting on an approved device against the same identity provider on any of those devices, they can simultaneously access those services using this method here. So they just simply need to have those devices under management and connected and approved to receive the solution between, we'll say, Jamf Pro and Jamf Security Cloud as an example.
So we have a question from Edward Lewis. He is asking, do you have a way of connecting back to on-premise resources via the WireGuard connection?
That is a really great question. Okay, so let's dive into that one. Let me go into best illustrated, I think, by looking here. And for those on the call, I want to make sure everyone is up to speed. We have two types of connections when we're making a trusted access connection out to the world. We can connect back into SaaS applications, and we have a slew of SaaS endpoints that we have already populated. You can really plug in any other, as long as you know the host name, the IP, the particulars to get back to that solution set. Or folks can connect back to an enterprise network, of course, to get back to private network resources. Now, in order to do that, we are moving for private networks. The connection state that's there is an IPsec connection. That's because 9 times out of 10, we're working to get back to that network. We're working with what we'll call an IPsec appliance from some hardware vendor, Cisco, Fortinet, Juniper. To make that connection happen. So those appliances today don't natively speak WireGuard. So in those instances, we are moving back to an IPsec connection to make that happen. But the first hop, if you will, from the device, wherever that device may be in the world, to one of our gateways will be a WireGuard connection. The second part, if we're going back to a private network, that would be over IPsec. But if you're going back to a SaaS endpoint, you'll be end-to-end WireGuard in terms of the connection state. Great question, by the way.
In terms of the trusted, like what I thought was great about Security Cloud was the idea that, obviously if you're not using it, then you could block the apps that they would no longer have access to.
Mm-hmm.
Could you explain a little bit about the difference between using the Mac, and then how it applies to iOS? Or at least I feel like there's a little bit of a difference in that, or am I wrong?
No. It's a good question. Okay, yeah. So your question is around the ability to gate particular connections, resources behind a trusted access connection. Yeah. So the way that we apply these services, and I think this is the layer you're getting at, on a Mac is a little bit different than the way we do it on the mobile devices. So on the Mac, as you know, we have Jamf Protect, that's our EDR client. We have Jamf Connect, which actually, from a SKU perspective, folks who are looking to pick up the tech, it's Protect and Connect is actually how you gain entry into Security Cloud. These components come with it. And technically here at Jamf, we do call the ZTNA components part of Jamf Connect. And those of you who are familiar know that that's our sort of SSO binding, if you will, technology on the Mac. Mac, now with privilege escalation, I think I should say. But also, we're classifying the ZTNA components to be part of the Connect family as well. So I bring this up to say, on the Mac, we are working with essentially three client states where we have Protect, Classic Protect we're installing on the device, we have Connect that we're installing on the device, and then we are simultaneously also pushing out an activation profile to Macs for Security Cloud. Why is that? We're doing that on Mac because on the Mac, we could certainly do some MTD components, but on the Mac, let's just be frank, our ability to go much deeper on the Mac, to use Apple native technologies, obviously the attack surface also on a Mac could be greater as well. So we want to use our EDR client to do the heavy lifting there. From a Connect standpoint, even though we're classifying the Jamf Security Cloud components as part of Connect, this technology I'm showing you here doesn't natively, other than the integration components, do anything to bind a Mac to against IDP credentials and sync those logins, and certainly the privilege escalation components. So we still need the Connect client on there. But what we can provide with this tool on the Mac is we can apply a lot of the cloud-centric components that Protect, Connect don't do without a solution like this. So there's inherently a set of protections components that the device will get when this is installed alongside of the sort of classic clients that would be installed against the Mac. On mobile devices, this solution set is a one-stop shop, and that is primarily, you could look at that in two ways. You could look at it as, a solution that is custom tailored to work on the mobile device. You could also look at it from the lens to say, well, based on the security model and the fact that we'll stick with Apple devices, that this is iOS and there's less of an attack surface there. We don't have an EDR native client. We can't port over, in other words, Protect or Connect onto mobile, and there's just no analog really on mobile for some of those services. So this solution is a one install shop on mobile. It's an additional install on the Mac. Now, to get back to the idea of gating resources behind here, behind a ZTNA connection, once you have the installation installed correctly, either for Mac or for mobile, the model looks a little bit different as we just talked about. Then you can stand up these policies, and depending on how you implement them, we get folks who say, look, we just want to make sure anytime our folks are on a corporate device and they're connecting back to these services, we just want to make sure that they're connected. We want to make sure the right person is connected to them. Then we have folks who say, hey, look, we have access to, maybe it's a Salesforce instance or some other network resource that's usually behind a private network. Folks will then take our cloud gateway addresses, and they will essentially whitelist those IPs and only allow traffic to come in over our cloud, our cloud gateways, our edge gateways for Security Cloud, for those to happen. The end result of that is that I can only access those resources when it's established on a corporate approved device. Once I've validated my identity and my identity is still good with the identity provider, and I have conditional access to gain access to those services, all of that sort of stuff, and my device is in a secure posture, then I can go back and I can connect into that resource. So if I try to connect on another device, I will just get, I'll get a 404 page. I won't be able to resolve the connection. And that really is the idea of being able to block and gate those connections behind a trusted access connection. So yeah, hopefully that got at some of those differences.
Yes, I appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah. Love the question.
All right, as we wind down here, I do have one more question before we break. So in the integrations under access gateways, currently dedicated IPsec gateways are limited to 50. Is there any vision from Jamf to add on to that, open up more gateways for environments if they need them? And if not, is there a way to manipulate the existing infrastructure so that we could pipe more gateways to a dedicated IPsec gateway?
Yeah, so we have two different methods on ramp, and your question or the question is particularly around the dedicated gateway. So the dedicated gateway is a service whereby we essentially route traffic on, as the name implies, a dedicated internet gateway. That is your own IP address. We're going to get a set of IP addresses where only your traffic transits against them. And that is typically also a paid service. Right now from Jamf, I think based on what we're seeing from uptake from that, we have a few customers utilizing them. I don't know that we've seen quite that level of uptake in terms of that complexity, but I do think the team is open to entertaining that idea. I just don't think we've encountered a use case. I think what I've been exposed to, typically, you see two or three of those connection types, and we haven't seen it really come up above there. So I think they're open to it. May just be that the use cases are different than what was originally envisioned.
Awesome. Thank you very much. Incredible answers, Wayne. Appreciate it big time.
Happy to.
Thank you so much again, Wayne, for joining us and giving this presentation and answering everyone's questions. And then just to talk about what we have coming up next month, we have Sean Rabbit talking about platform SSO. I know that's a feature a lot of us have been interested in, but yeah, Sean is he talked about it at JNUC, and he's going to talk a bit more about the new capabilities of platform SSO and how it works in conjunction with Jamf Connect and some of these other tools. So make sure you check that out. We do this every month too, so make sure you come back and check out our website to check out more great presentations that we have as well. We're kind of cooking up our schedule for 2025, so we have some great guest presenters on the horizon. So with that, we'll close this out. Thanks so much, Wayne.
Happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for joining us today. We have new episodes on the first Friday of every month. If you'd like to join our session live, visit the link in the description to get on our mailing list. And if you're looking to get the most out of your Jamf server, visit rocketman.tech to set up a meeting with one of our Jamf experts. That's rocketman.tech.